The sensor array aboard the Vorkal observation station had been monitoring the caldera expanse for 300 cycles without incident. The vast emptiness between territories rarely produced anything more interesting than rogue asteroids or the occasional merchant vessel taking a shortcut through unregulated space. Senior observer Zelvar had grown comfortable with the routine, his four manipulator limbs moving across the holographic displays with practiced ease, while his primary eyes monitored the scanning results, and his secondary eyes tracked the reports flowing from other stations across the sector. When the proximity alarm triggered, Zelvar's integumentary plates shifted from their relaxed blue to an alert yellow. Something had entered the monitored zone. Something moving at sublight speeds with a trajectory that suggested mechanical failure rather than deliberate navigation. His tertiary assistant, a younger Vorkal named Pix then, immediately began running identification protocols while Zelvar opened a communication channel to the sector commander. "Commander Thalrex, we have an unidentified vessel drifting through grid 774. Configuration unknown. No response to standard hails." Zelvar kept his voice calm, professional. In 2 centuries of service, he had learned that panic served no purpose in the vastness of space. The commander's face appeared on the display, her plates a steady green that indicated mild curiosity rather than concern. Origin? Uncertain. Running comparative analysis now. Zelvar gestured to Pix then, who brought up the preliminary scan results. The vessel appears damaged. Hull breaches in multiple sections. Power fluctuations consistent with failing containment systems. But Commander, the design is unlike anything in our database. Thalrex's plates shifted slightly toward yellow. Elaborate. The construction appears crude by our standards. Heavy armor plating, redundant structural supports, weapons systems that seem excessive for a vessel of this size class. If I were to estimate, I would classify it as a warship. But the technology profile does not match any known civilization in this sector or the adjacent territories. A warship? Thalrex's voice carried the harmonics of skepticism. The minor species in this region barely achieve system-level flight, much less military vessels capable of crossing the expanse. Perhaps it is a derelict from the old wars? Zelvar had considered that possibility. 10,000 cycles ago, before the Vorkal hegemony had established order in this region, several primitive species had engaged in destructive conflicts that littered space with debris. But something about this vessel felt different. Permission to conduct a full-spectrum analysis? Granted. But Zelvar, be cautious. If this is indeed a warship from an unknown source, we must determine if it represents a threat to hegemony space. The connection closed, and Zelvar turned his full attention to the mysterious vessel. He activated the station's primary scanning array, directing focused beams of energy across multiple spectrums toward the drifting ship. The data began flowing back immediately, and what Zelvar saw made his plates flash through a rapid sequence of colors that indicated confusion, surprise, and growing concern. Pix then, verify these readings. The younger observer leaned over the display, his own plates flickering with uncertainty. Senior observer, the power output readings must be incorrect. A vessel of this size cannot possibly generate energy at these levels. Run the verification protocol twice. I want to be certain. Zelvar pulled up the weapons analysis. What he saw defied logic. The ship mounted rail-based kinetic accelerators that could achieve velocities approaching a significant fraction of light speed. Missile batteries, with yields that could crack a small moon. Energy weapons that, while primitive in design, could output destructive force comparable to hegemony cruiser-class armaments. A species capable of building such weapons would be known to us. Verification complete, Senior Observer. The readings are accurate within acceptable margins of error. Zelvar felt the instinctive tightening of his respiratory systems that Vorkal experienced when faced with incomprehensible data. He had spent 2 centuries studying alien species, cataloging their technological development, predicting their expansion patterns. The hegemony's strength lay in its knowledge, its ability to understand and anticipate. But this vessel challenged everything he understood about technological progression. Analyze the hull composition. The results appeared moments later. The armor was a composite of materials that the scanning system identified as iron, carbon, tungsten, and several other heavy elements. It was thick, redundant, designed to absorb tremendous punishment. But it was also crude. Where Vorkal vessels used molecularly aligned crystal matrices that could distribute impact forces across entire sections, this ship simply relied on massive amounts of dense metal. It was the technological equivalent of a club compared to a precision blade. Yet the readings suggested this crude approach was somehow effective. Scarring across the hull indicated the vessel had survived multiple high-energy impacts that should have destroyed it. Whatever species built this ship understood that sometimes simple, robust engineering outlasted elegant design. Senior observer, the biological analysis has completed. Pixthen's voice carried harmonics of distress. There are life forms aboard that vessel. Gelvar's plates went completely white, a color that Vorkal displayed only in moments of extreme shock. That is impossible. The radiation levels inside that ship would be lethal to any carbon-based life form. The hull breaches alone would have exposed the interior to hard vacuum. The sensors detect approximately 143 individual life signs. Bipedal, carbon-based, bilateral symmetry. Senior observer, they are alive despite conditions that should have killed them. Gelvar pulled up the environmental data from inside the damaged vessel. Sections that maintained atmosphere registered temperatures that fluctuated between uncomfortably cold and dangerously hot. Radiation levels spiked high enough to cause cellular damage in most known species. Gravity appeared to be maintained in some sections, but not others. It was a nightmare of survival conditions. And yet the biological signatures remained strong. Not just alive, but active. Moving through the damaged sections, performing what appeared to be repair operations, conducting activities that suggested a functioning crew, despite the catastrophic damage their ship had sustained. Pull up the gravitational analysis, Gelvar ordered, a suspicion forming in his mind. The data confirmed his fear. The vessel maintained an internal gravity of approximately 10 meters per second squared. That was nearly twice what the Vorkal considered standard. Most species in the known galaxy evolved on worlds with gravitational fields between 5 and 7 meters per second squared. Higher gravity meant stronger bone structure, more robust musculature, greater cardiovascular capacity. It meant these beings were physically powerful in ways that most civilized species were not. Pix then access the xenobiological database. Cross-reference these biological signatures with known species parameters. The younger Vorkal worked quickly, his manipulator limbs dancing across the controls. After several moments, he looked up, his plates displaying confusion. Senior observer, there is no match. These beings do not correspond to any catalogued species in hegemony records. Gelvar felt the cold certainty of a significant discovery settling over him. This was first contact with an unknown species. But unlike the usual encounters with primitive civilizations barely achieving orbital flight, this was contact with a species that had independently developed faster than light travel, built warships that rivaled hegemony military technology, and somehow survived in conditions that would kill most other known life forms. Initiate standard first contact protocols. Broadcast greeting messages on all common frequencies. Mathematical sequences. Visual patterns. Anything that might establish communication. While Pix then began the transmission sequence, Gelvar continued analyzing the vessel. The more he learned, the more disturbed he became. The ship's database was encrypted, but passive scanning could still detect information structure. The vessel's computer systems were primitive by hegemony standards, using binary processing rather than quantum matrices. Yet the amount of data storage was immense, suggesting a civilization with extensive records and complex information networks. The propulsion system was particularly fascinating and disturbing. The vessel used a form of spatial manipulation that the Vorkal had theorized about but considered too energy-intensive to be practical. These beings had somehow made it work through what appeared to be sheer brute force engineering. Instead of elegantly bending space, they seemed to have simply forced it to comply through overwhelming power output. Senior Observer, we are receiving no response to our hails. Gelvar was not surprised. If this species was truly unknown to the hegemony, they would have no context for understanding standard galactic protocols. They might not even recognize the mathematical sequences as attempts at communication. Continue broadcasting. Route a priority message to Commander Thalrex. Inform her we have confirmed this is a vessel from an unknown species with technology at or near hegemony equivalency. As Pix then composed the message, Gelvar noticed something in the sensor data that made his respiratory systems constrict. Energy signatures within the damaged vessel were shifting. Power was being rerouted from failing systems to other sections. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone with military training. They were charging their weapons. Pix then raised defensive screens immediately. Broadcast on all frequencies that we are not hostile. Use every communication protocol in the database. Senior Observer, what is happening? Gelvar's plates had gone dark red, the Vorkal color of fear. They think we are enemies. They are preparing to fight. Rai, the younger observer's voice rose in pitch, harmonics of panic creeping in. But they are damaged, outnumbered, in failing vessels. Logic dictates surrender, or at minimum, opening communications to determine intent. Why would they prepare for combat? That was the question that would haunt Gelvar in the cycles to come. He stared at the image of the damaged warship on his display, at the beings moving within it who refused to stop fighting despite impossible odds. And he realized something terrifying. Perhaps logic did not dictate their actions. Perhaps this species operated on principles the Vorkal did not understand. Perhaps they would fight not because they believed they could win, but because the alternative was unthinkable to them. Get me Commander Thalrex now, Gelvar said quietly, and prepare to move the station to a safe distance. I believe we are about to learn what this species does when cornered. Also, on his display, the weapon systems of the unknown vessel completed their charging sequence. Deep inside that battered ship, beings that should have been dead prepared for battle against an enemy they did not understand, in a situation where surrender would have been the logical choice. And that, Gelvar realized with dawning horror, was perhaps the most important thing he had learned about them. They did not calculate odds and make rational decisions based on probability of survival. They simply refused to stop fighting, even when fighting made no logical sense. The Vorkal had encountered many species in their long history. They had catalogued thousands of civilizations, understood their development patterns, predicted their behaviors. But now, drifting in the darkness of the caldera expanse, they had found something new. Something that did not fit their models. Something that survived when it should have died and fought when it should have surrendered. Gelvar looked at the designation the computer had assigned to the unknown vessel, UNSC Relentless. He did not yet know what those letters meant, but he suspected the name was fitting. Whatever species had built this ship, whatever beings crewed it, they were relentless in ways the galaxy had not seen before. And that realization shook him to the core. Captain Maria Reeves had been commanding the UNSC Relentless for 3 years, and in that time, she had learned that space combat was 90% boredom and 10% absolute terror. Right now, she was experiencing the terror part while trying very hard to appear calm for her crew. Tactical, what am I looking at? She kept her voice steady, despite the alarms blaring throughout the bridge. The ship had taken a beating from the pirate ambush 2 days ago, and now they had stumbled into something that made pirates look like a minor inconvenience. Lieutenant Chen studied his displays, his dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of the tactical screen. 3 contacts, Captain. Unknown configuration. They appeared on our sensors 15 minutes ago and have been broadcasting some kind of signal on multiple frequencies ever since. Translation? Nothing coherent, ma'am. The computer can't make sense of it. Mathematical sequences mostly. Some visual patterns. But nothing in any human language or even any recognizable format. Reeves stood from her command chair and moved closer to the main view screen. The three vessels hung in space at a distance of roughly 50,000 kilometers. They were unlike anything in the UNSC database. Sleek, organic-looking curves instead of the angular functionality of human ships. No visible weapon ports, though she knew better than to assume that meant they were unarmed. How big are they? Lead vessel is approximately 800 meters. The other two are smaller, maybe 300 each. Captain, their energy signatures are off the charts. Whatever they're using for power makes our fusion reactors look like birthday candles. Commander Jackson, her executive officer, moved to stand beside her. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and the kind of calm demeanor that came from 20 years in space. Could be first contact. Captain, could be. Reeves crossed her arms, thinking. The Relentless was in bad shape. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9. The port railgun was completely offline. Life support was operating at 60% capacity. Half her crew was injured to some degree. They had been trying to limp back to the nearest UNSC outpost when these unknown vessels appeared. Or it could be more hostiles. We're not exactly in a position to take chances. The transmissions don't seem aggressive, Jackson offered. If they wanted to attack, they could have done it already. Maybe they're waiting to see what we do. Testing us. Reeves had dealt with enough pirates and separatist groups to know that not every threat announced itself with weapons fire. Sometimes the smart play was to appear peaceful while sizing up your target. Captain, they're moving, Chen announced. All three vessels adjusting position. They're spreading out, creating a wider formation. Reeves felt her jaw tighten. That looked like a tactical maneuver. Spreading out meant they were harder to target, could attack from multiple angles, could surround the Relentless if needed, charge the weapons, all remaining systems. And someone get me a damage report from engineering. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, their training overriding any fear they might feel. Reeves had served with most of them long enough to trust their competence. But she also saw the tension in their shoulders, the way their eyes kept flicking to the view screen. The damage report came through from Chief Engineer Torres. Her voice crackled over the comm, with interference from the damaged systems. Captain, you've got maybe one good shot from the starboard railgun before the power grid collapses. The missile tubes are loaded, but the targeting systems are compromised. And I'm not sure how much more punishment the hull can take before we start losing atmosphere in the inhabited sections. Understood. Keep the reactor stable. I need weapons power. More than I need comfort, right now. You got it, Captain. Reeves turned back to the view screen. The unknown vessels had completed their formation change. They now formed a loose triangle with the Relentless in the center. It was definitely a tactical position. Chen, can we run? Negative, ma'am. The FTL drive is still offline. Torres says, another 6 hours minimum before we can jump. And even at full sublight, they're faster than us in our current condition. So they were trapped, damaged, outgunned, facing an unknown enemy in the middle of nowhere. Reeves had been in bad situations before, but this was rapidly becoming one of the worst. All right. 45. TU. Here's what we're going to do. Continue broadcasting on all frequencies. Standard first contact protocols. Peace messages. But keep the weapons charged and ready. If they make any aggressive moves, we respond with everything we have. Captain, if these are friendlies, opening fire could start a war, Jackson said quietly. And if they're hostiles, hesitating could get us all killed. Reeves met her XO's eyes. I'm not sacrificing this crew on the hope that unknown aliens have good intentions. We defend ourselves. Always. Jackson nodded slowly. He understood. That was why she valued him. He questioned her decisions when appropriate but supported them once made. For the next 20 minutes, nothing happened. The unknown vessels maintained their positions. The transmissions continued in both directions. neither side understanding the other. Reeves used the time to rotate crew shifts, making sure everyone got food and water. In a crisis, you took care of the basics because you never knew when the next chance would come. She was reviewing casualty reports from the medical bay when Chen spoke up again. "Captain, one of the smaller vessels is moving, heading directly toward us." Reeves was back in her command chair instantly. "How fast?" "Slow approach. Maybe they want a closer look. Or maybe they were preparing to board." Reeves had heard stories from the outer colonies about pirates who disabled ships and then took them apart while the crews were still alive. Distance? 30,000 kilometers and closing. Lock weapons on that vessel. Broadcast on all channels that we will defend ourselves if they enter 10,000 kilometers. The smaller alien ship continued its approach. 25,000 kilometers. 20,000. It showed no signs of stopping or acknowledging the warnings. "Captain, they're doing some kind of active scan. High-energy beams across multiple frequencies." Chen's voice was tight with tension. "It's hitting our hull, penetrating the damaged sections. That did it." Reeves had been willing to give them the benefit of doubt, had tried to assume good intentions. But scanning a damaged ship without permission was an aggressive act by any standard. It was what pirates did before they struck. What military vessels did when they were preparing to target vulnerable points. "Fire a warning shot. Chen, put a railgun round across their bow. Close enough that they know we're serious, but not so close that we can't claim it was a warning." "Aye, Captain." The Relentless shuddered as the starboard railgun fired. The round was a simple slug of tungsten, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. It streaked past the approaching alien vessel with less than a kilometer to spare, a clear message in any language. The effect was immediate and not what Reeves expected. The alien ship's shields, which had been invisible until now, flared brilliant blue as they were clipped by the railgun round's passage. For a moment, the shields held. Then they collapsed in a cascade of energy discharge. The ship tumbled backward, power systems fluctuating wildly. "Direct hit on their shields," Chen reported, his voice filled with surprise. "Captain, their defensive systems couldn't handle our weapons." Reeves stared at the view screen. She had ordered a warning shot, a near miss designed to demonstrate capability without causing damage. But somehow, the round had been close enough to collapse their shields entirely. That meant either her crew's aim was better than intended, or these aliens' defensive technology was not as advanced as their propulsion and power systems suggested. Before she could process that thought, the other two alien vessels reacted. Energy signatures spiked. Weapons, ports that had been hidden now opened along their hulls, and from the lead vessel came a beam of coherent energy that struck the Relentless directly. Alarms screamed. The ship shook violently. Reeves gripped her chair as the gravity fluctuated. "Damage report. Forward shields are gone. Hull breach on deck 3. Casualties reported." Jackson's voice was clipped, professional despite the chaos. "Captain, they just disabled our weapons with a single shot." The lights on the bridge flickered. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Reeves could smell ozone and burning insulation. "Torres? Status?" The engineer's voice came through with more static than before. "They took out the weapons grid. I can't restore it without a full system rebuild. Captain, whatever they hit us with, it was surgical. They knew exactly where to shoot. Of course they did. They had scanned the Relentless thoroughly. They knew where every system was located, every vulnerability in the damaged hull." Reeves had made a critical mistake. She had assumed that because her warning shot had been effective, they were facing a less advanced enemy. But they were not less advanced. They were more precise. The message was clear. The alien vessels could have destroyed the Relentless entirely. Instead, they had simply removed its ability to fight back. "Captain, they're hailing us again. Different frequency. They're transmitting visual data." "Put it on screen." The main view screen flickered, and then an image appeared. Reeves found herself looking at what she could only assume was an alien. Its body was roughly cylindrical, with 4 limb-like appendages arranged symmetrically around its torso. The head, if that was what it was, had multiple eyes in different positions. The skin looked like overlapping plates that changed color as she watched. But what struck her most was the expression. She had no context for alien body language, but something about the way this being held itself suggested caution rather than aggression. Its manipulator limbs were extended, empty, in what might have been a peaceful gesture. "They're trying to communicate," Jackson said quietly. "Maria, I think they're trying to tell us they're not hostile." Reeves wanted to believe that. But she had just watched this being's people disable her ship with frightening efficiency. "They have a strange way of showing it." The alien on the screen gestured toward something off-camera. The image changed, showing what appeared to be mathematical formulas and visual representations of physical concepts. Basic physics. Universal constants. The kind of thing that any technological species would recognize. "They're trying to establish common ground," Chen observed. "First, contact protocols. They want us to know they're intelligent and peaceful. After shooting us, after we shot first," Jackson pointed out. Reeves knew he was right, but admitting it stuck in her throat. The instinct to defend her ship and crew overrode everything else. "We fired a warning shot. They scanned us without permission, because we didn't respond to their initial communications. Captain, I think there's been a misunderstanding on both sides." The alien on the screen was joined by another, this one smaller with different coloration. They were having what appeared to be a discussion, their body plates shifting through various colors. Then, the first alien turned back to the camera and made a gesture that looked almost like spreading its arms wide. "I think that's supposed to be non-threatening," Jackson said, "like showing empty hands." Reeves took a deep breath and forced herself to think past her immediate reactions. They were in a damaged ship, incapable of fighting or running. The aliens had them completely at their mercy. If they wanted to destroy the Relentless, they could do it easily. But instead, they were trying to communicate. Maybe, just maybe, this was first contact, rather than first combat. "All right, Chen, lower whatever weapons we have left. Broadcast that we understand they're trying to communicate. Use those same visual protocols they're showing us. Basic physics, mathematical sequences, whatever might work." "Yes, ma'am. And someone get medical teams to Deck 3. We've got injured crew that need attention." As the bridge crew worked to establish communication with the aliens, Reeves allowed herself to sink back in her chair. Her hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline still coursing through her system. She thought about how close they had come to a shooting war with a species that clearly outmatched them technologically, but she also thought about how her crew had reacted. Injured, in a failing ship, against unknown opponents with superior technology. Not one person had suggested surrender. They had prepared to fight because that was what humans did when cornered. Looking at the aliens on the view screen, at their cautious gestures and attempts at peaceful communication, Reeves wondered what they must think of humanity. A species that fired weapons when frightened. That prepared to fight rather than negotiate. That chose defiance over submission, even when logic suggested otherwise. She suspected that humanity's introduction to galactic civilization was not going according to anyone's standard protocols, and somehow, that felt entirely appropriate. Zelvar watched the human vessel with a mixture of fascination and growing dread. The Relentless hung in space before his observation station, its weapons systems disabled by precise targeting from Commander Thalrex's strike force. By all logical calculation, the engagement was over. The humans had been neutralized as a threat without being destroyed, leaving room for peaceful communication to proceed. Except the humans did not appear to understand that they had lost. Senior observer, the biological readings from the human vessel are extremely concerning. Pix then pulled up the medical analysis on the shared display. The energy strike caused additional casualties aboard their ship. We now detect 17 life signs in critical condition, and 43 with significant injuries. Yet the crew continues normal operations. End quote. Avalo. Zelvar studied the data with increasing confusion. The Vorkal had spent millennia perfecting the art of measured response in conflict. When an opponent was sufficiently degraded, they surrendered. It was logical. It preserved life and allowed for negotiated resolution. But these humans were not following that pattern. Internal sensors showed crew members moving through damaged sections wearing primitive pressure suits. They were conducting repairs on systems that any logical analysis would classify as beyond field restoration. Others were transporting injured crew to their medical facilities while simultaneously maintaining combat readiness at stations throughout the ship. PICs then. Focus sensors on their armory section. The younger Vorkal complied, and the results made Jelvar's plates flash pale blue with alarm. Human crew members were accessing lockers filled with projectile weapons, kinetic rifles, explosive devices, and close combat implements that seemed designed for nothing other than inflicting physical harm. They were arming themselves for boarding defense. "They think we are going to board them," Jelvar said quietly. "They are preparing for close combat. But that is illogical. We have demonstrated superior capability. Standard protocol would be to establish communication and negotiate terms. Why would they assume boarding action?" Jelvar did not have an answer. Or rather, he had an answer that disturbed him greatly. Perhaps humans did not think in terms of logical surrender. Perhaps their response to overwhelming force was not negotiation but escalation. Commander Thalrex appeared on his communication display, her plates showing calm green despite the situation. "Senior Observer. Report. Are the humans responding to communication attempts?" "Yes and no, Commander. They are acknowledging our transmissions and attempting to respond with basic mathematical and visual protocols. However, they are simultaneously preparing their crew for combat. I believe they expect us to board their vessel. That is an incorrect assessment of our intentions." "Agreed. But I am not certain they are capable of making that distinction. Commander, I recommend we maintain current distance and continue communication attempts. Do not approach their vessel until we have established clearer protocols." Thalrex's plates flickered yellow briefly. "Understood. I will have my tactical officer prepare a visual demonstration showing non-hostile intent. Perhaps if they see our vessels moving away rather than approaching, they will understand." The communication ended, and Jelvar watched as the 3 Vorkal warships began slowly backing away from the Relentless, maintaining constant distance. It was the universal signal for non-aggression. Give the opponent space. Demonstrate that you are not pressing an advantage. For several minutes, nothing changed aboard the human vessel. Then, gradually, the weapons systems that had been showing power fluctuations stabilized. The crew continued arming themselves, but the urgency seemed to diminish slightly. They were watching, waiting, trying to understand Vorkal intentions, the same way Jelvar was trying to understand theirs. "Senior Observer. I have completed the translation matrix for human language." Pix then sounded pleased with himself. The computer has analyzed their communication attempts and cross-referenced them with observed behavioral patterns. I believe I can provide basic translation of their database information. Show me their designation for themselves. Text appeared on Jelvar's display in Vorkal script. Converted from the human data. They call themselves humans, from a planet named Earth. Their vessel designation is United Nations Space Command, Relentless. United Nations. That implied a form of collective governance. Space Command suggested military organization. And Relentless. That word translated into Vorkal as something like refusing to stop or continuing without pause. It was a name that suggested determination rather than elegance or wisdom. Access their historical database. I want to understand these beings. What Pix then found made Jelvar wish he had not asked. The human database contained extensive historical records, and as the translation matrix processed them, a picture emerged that explained much of what he had witnessed. Humans came from a planet with gravitational force of 9.8 meters per second squared. Their world had extreme climate variations, tectonic activity that caused regular catastrophic events, and an ecosystem filled with predatory species that humans had somehow survived despite lacking natural weapons or armor. They were pursuit predators who evolved to chase prey across vast distances until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. But it was their history that truly disturbed Zelvar. The Vorkal had spent 200,000 cycles, slowly developing technology, carefully expanding across their home system, and then beyond, avoiding conflict whenever possible, and building a civilization based on logical cooperation. Humans had developed faster than light travel in less than 10,000 of their years. And they had done it while fighting constant wars with each other. Pix then. These records cannot be accurate. They claim to have survived 6 major extinction events on their home world. The translation matrix is functioning correctly, senior observer. Humans evolved in an environment that regularly attempted to kill them through climate change, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and disease. Their adaptation was to become more resilient rather than to avoid the dangers. Zelvar scrolled through the historical data, his plates shifting through colors so rapidly they might have seemed to strobe. Humans had fought wars with everything from sharpened stones to nuclear weapons. They had divided themselves into competing groups based on geography, ideology, and resource access. Then spent millennia destroying each other. Even now, according to their records, humanity was not unified. The United Nations Space Command represented only a coalition of nations, not a single planetary government. How did they achieve space travel while still fighting among themselves? It appears conflict drives their innovation. Many of their greatest technological advances came during or immediately after major wars. They do not develop technology peacefully and then occasionally apply it to conflict. They develop technology for conflict and then sometimes apply it to peaceful purposes. That was backwards from every species the Vorkal had encountered. Civilization required cooperation. Technology required peace. Conflict destroyed progress. These were fundamental truths that every logical species understood, but humans appeared to operate on different principles entirely. Zelvar pulled up the medical data about human biology. What he found explained much, but comforted him little. Humans had redundant biological systems, paired organs where one could fail and the other would compensate, a skeletal structure that could maintain function even with significant damage, a cardiovascular system with backup pathways, and most disturbing, a neurochemical response to danger that they called an adrenaline rush. Pix then translate this biological response. What does adrenaline do? When humans perceive a threat, their bodies flood with hormones that increase heart rate, dilate airways, redirect blood flow to muscles, and suppress pain perception. It temporarily enhances their physical capabilities while reducing their ability to feel fear or consider consequences. The effect is automatic and involuntary. Zelvar sat back, his manipulator limbs going still. That explained why the injured humans continued fighting, why they prepared for combat despite impossible odds, why they seemed unable to surrender even when logic demanded it. Their biology would not let them stop fighting. The Vorkal had encountered aggressive species before, but those species could be reasoned with. Once they understood, they were outmatched. Humans, apparently, could not. Or perhaps more accurately, humans could understand they were outmatched, but would fight anyway because their bodies would override their minds and force them to continue. Senior observer, the human captain is broadcasting directly to us. Pix then brought up the transmission. Visual communication. She wants us to see her. The image showed a human female wearing a dark blue uniform. Her face was pale skin, marked by time and stress. Her eyes were forward-facing, predatory. Her mouth was set in a firm line that the translation matrix suggested indicated determination. Behind her, the bridge of the Relentless showed damage and chaos, but the crew was functioning with evident discipline. The human captain spoke, and the translation matrix provided approximate meaning. I am Captain Maria Reeves, of the United Nations Space Command. My vessel is damaged. We fired at your ship because we believed you were hostile. If you are not hostile, we are willing to communicate. But be aware that we will defend ourselves if attacked. We do not surrender. We do not abandon our ship. If you want to destroy us, you will have to do it while we fight back with everything we have. Zelvar listened to this declaration with growing understanding. The captain was not threatening the Vorkal. She was simply stating facts about human behavior. They would defend themselves. They would not surrender. They would fight until physically incapable of fighting. It was not bravado. It was warning. Broadcast response. Zelvar ordered. Tell her we are not hostile. Tell her we are attempting peaceful first contact with her species. Tell her we do not wish to fight. 2. As Pix then composed the message, Zelvar continued studying the human data. He found psychological profiles that made his plates flush dark, purple, with concern. Humans had a concept they called going down swinging, which meant fighting even when defeat was certain. They had military decorations for actions, where individuals sacrificed themselves to save others. They told stories about last stands and impossible victories that served as cultural touchstones. They were not a logical species. They were a species that survived by refusing to accept when they should die. The translation matrix had processed enough data to provide a rough timeline of human development. They had been spacefaring for less than 200 of their years. They had achieved faster than light travel only 30 years ago. They had expanded across dozens of star systems, established colonies, built military and civilian infrastructure that spanned light years. The Vorkal had taken 10,000 cycles to do what humans accomplished in 3 decades. Senior Observer. Captain Reeves is responding to our message. The human captain's face on the screen had not changed expression, but her body language had relaxed fractionally. We acknowledge your peaceful intent. We are willing to establish communication protocols, but we need to attend to our injured crew first. Give us 6 hours to stabilize our ship, and then we can discuss first contact procedures. Zelvar approved the request immediately. 6 hours to stabilize a ship in the condition of the Relentless was optimistic. But he was learning that humans were optimistic about impossible tasks. That was probably how they survived. As the communication ended, Commander Thalrex contacted him again. Senior Observer, what is your assessment of these humans? Zelvar considered his response carefully. He was a scientist, trained to observe and analyze without emotional bias. But what he had learned about humanity in the past hours defied purely logical analysis. Commander, I believe we have encountered a species that should not exist. They evolved in an environment that should have killed them. They developed faster than light travel while fighting wars that should have destroyed them. They built ships that are crude by our standards, but effective through sheer over-engineering. And most importantly, they have a biological and psychological makeup that prevents them from surrendering, even when surrender is the logical choice. Are they a threat to the hegemony? That was the question that mattered. Zelvar thought about the Relentless, damaged and outgunned, with crew members preparing to fight with primitive weapons against an enemy that could destroy them from a distance. He thought about Captain Reeves calmly stating that her people would fight to the death rather than surrender. He thought about a species that turned conflict into progress and refused to accept extinction. Yes, Commander, humans are a threat. Not because they are more advanced than us. Not because they are more numerous or better armed. They are a threat because they do not think like we do. They do not calculate odds and make logical decisions. They fight, and they keep fighting, and they refuse to stop fighting until they win or until they are physically incapable of continuing. And based on their history, even death does not always stop them because they will sacrifice themselves to ensure their species continues. There was a long pause before Thalrex responded. What do you recommend? Zelvar looked at the image of the Relentless on his display. At the humans working to save their ship against impossible odds. at the species that survived. By refusing to die, I recommend we treat them as equals, Commander. Because if we treat them as enemies, I do not believe we will win the resulting war. Not because we lack the capability, but because humans will never accept defeat. And a war against an enemy that refuses to lose is a war without end. 6 hours later, Captain Reeves stood in what passed for the Relentless's conference room and tried not to show her amazement. The room was barely more than a cleared storage bay with a table and chairs bolted to the deck, but it now hosted humanity's first formal meeting with an alien species. Across from her sat senior observer Gelvar, his four-limbed form somehow folding itself into a chair that clearly was not designed for his anatomy. The translation software they had cobbled together was barely functional. It rendered Gelvar's words in English with about a 3-second delay and probable accuracy of maybe 70%. But it was enough. They could communicate. That alone felt like a miracle. "Your ship is called Relentless," Gelvar said through the translator, his voice coming out synthesized and flat. "This word has meaning in your language that suggests persistence?" "It means we don't give up," Reeves confirmed. "We keep going no matter what." Gelvar's body plates shifted through colors that the translation software helpfully informed her indicated thoughtfulness. "This is consistent with what I have learned about your species. Captain Reeves, I must ask you a question that may seem strange. How many wars has humanity survived?" Reeves blinked. That was not the question she had expected. Survived? "We fought thousands of wars throughout our history." "No, I mean wars that threatened your extinction. Total wars. Conflicts that could have ended your species." Reeves thought about it. "At least 2 that we know of. The world wars in our 20th century came close. Nuclear weapons, chemical warfare, millions dead. We nearly destroyed ourselves. And before that, probably conflicts we don't even have records of anymore. But we survived." We? Conflicts. And you are still fighting wars now?" Gelvar's plates had gone a color, the software labeled as concerned orange. "Not wars exactly. Conflicts. Different nations have different interests. We're mostly unified for space exploration, but Earth still has tensions." Reeves was not sure how much to reveal about humanity's internal divisions. "Why do you ask?" Reeves, why do you ask?" "Because the Vorkal have not fought a war in 40,000 of our cycles. We achieved peace through logic and cooperation. We expand slowly, carefully, avoiding conflict. We have spent 200,000 cycles building our civilization. And yet you, who fight constantly, have achieved in 10,000 of your years what took us 20 times as long." Reeves felt defensive, pride rising in her chest. "We adapt quickly. We have to. Our planet is not gentle. I have reviewed the data about Earth." Gelvar gestured, with 2 of his manipulator limbs in what might have been emphasis. "Your gravity is nearly twice what most species consider standard. Your climate fluctuates dramatically. Your tectonic plates cause earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Storms powerful enough to destroy cities. Diseases that kill millions. And yet you not only survived but thrived. How? We're stubborn." Reeves said it simply because it was true. When something tries to kill us, we either kill it back, or we learn to live with it. We don't have much choice. Gelvar's plates went through a rapid color change that the software interpreted as multiple conflicting emotions. "This is what I do not understand. Choice. You say you do not have choice, but surely you could have developed differently. You could have pursued peace, cooperation, logical development, like the Vorkal. Maybe." Reeves leaned back in her chair. "But that's not who we are. We compete. With nature, with each other, with any challenge that presents itself. It's built into us. Yes, the adrenaline response. I have studied this biological reaction. When you face danger, your body forces you to fight or flee. You cannot choose to do neither. That's oversimplifying it. But basically, yes. Gelvar was quiet for a moment, his plates settling into a steady blue. Captain Reeves, I need to share information with you about the galaxy you have entered. The Vorkal hegemony controls this region of space. We are one of the oldest civilizations in the known galaxy. We have achieved this through careful diplomacy, measured expansion, and avoidance of unnecessary conflict. Most species we encounter follow similar patterns. They develop slowly, reach out cautiously, join the galactic community through negotiation and mutual benefit. But humans are different, Reeves said. Extraordinarily different. You are aggressive, rapid in your development, willing to fight when others would negotiate. This makes you dangerous in ways the hegemony is not prepared for. Reeves felt her jaw tighten. Are you saying we're not welcome in your galaxy? I am saying that we do not know what to do with you. Standard protocols assume that new species will want to integrate peacefully into existing structures. But humans appear to operate on different principles. You expand through colonization rather than careful settlement. You build military vessels before establishing full civilian infrastructure. You prepare for conflict as a default state rather than as a last resort. Because that's how we survive. Reeves stood, pacing the small room. Look, I get that we're different from what you're used to. But we're not monsters. Yes, we fight. Yes, we're aggressive. But we also cooperate. We build alliances. We help each other. Humanity has done terrible things. But we've also done incredible things. We've created art and music and literature. We've explored and discovered and learned. We're more than just soldiers. Gelvar watched her with multiple eyes, his attention absolute. If the hegemony tried to restrict human expansion, to place limits on where you could settle, or how quickly you could grow, how would humanity respond? Reeves stopped pacing. That was the real question, the one that mattered. She thought about Earth's history, about how humans reacted to being told what they could or could not do. Honestly, we would probably resist. We don't like being controlled. Even if the restrictions were logical, even if they were for the greater good of galactic stability, especially then. Humans don't trust anyone else to decide what's best for us. We make our own decisions, even if they're wrong. Reeves returned to her chair. We can sense that. I'm not saying we'd immediately start a war. But we wouldn't accept restrictions without pushing back hard. Gelvar's plates went dark purple. The software labeled this as distress. This is what concerns me. The hegemony operates on principles of collective benefit. Individual species subordinate some autonomy for the stability of all. But humans, I suspect, would not accept this arrangement. You're probably right. Reeves met his multiple-eyed gaze. So where does that leave us? Before Gelvar could answer, Commander Jackson entered the conference room. Captain, sorry to interrupt. Engineering has restored partial FTL capability. Torres says we can make a jump in about 3 hours. Good. Prepare a course back to the nearest UNSC outpost. Reeves turned back to Gelvar. I need to report this contact to my superiors. They'll want to establish proper diplomatic protocols. Of course. I must do the same with the Hegemony Council. Gelvar stood, his form unfolding in a way that seemed to defy standard anatomy. Captain Reeves, before we part, I must tell you something. When we first scanned your vessel, what we found shook us. Not because you are more advanced than us. Not because you are more powerful. But because you are something we have never encountered before. A species that thrives on challenge. That sees obstacles as opportunities. That refuses to accept limits. And that scares you. Yes. But it also fascinates me. The Vorkal have achieved stability through careful control. We know what works, because we have refined our methods over hundreds of thousands of cycles. But we have also become predictable. Stagnant, perhaps. We do not innovate as we once did, because we have found solutions that function adequately. Humans have not had time to become stagnant. You are still changing, still adapting, still pushing boundaries. Reeves felt something shift in her understanding of this alien. You think we can teach you something? And Wei, I think you can teach us many things. But I am also concerned that learning from humans will change the Vorkal in ways we cannot predict. Change is dangerous. It destabilizes. It creates uncertainty. Change is also necessary. Without it, you just keep doing the same things forever. Even when they stop working. Zelvar's plates flickered through several colors rapidly. You see? That is a very human perspective. The Vorkal would say that if something functions adequately, changing it only introduces risk of failure. You would say that if something functions adequately, changing it might make it function excellently. Both positions have logic, but they lead to very different civilizations. As Zelvar prepared to return to his own vessel, Reeves found herself thinking about what he had said. The Vorkal had 200,000 years of history. Humanity had maybe 10,000 years of recorded civilization. By any measure, the Vorkal were the elder species, the wiser culture, the more developed civilization. But they were afraid of humans. Not afraid of humanity's weapons or ships or technology. Afraid of the way humans thought. The way humans refused to accept limits. The way humans turned problems into challenges, and challenges into opportunities. Senior observer. Reeves called as Zelvar reached the door. One more thing. You asked me how many wars humanity has survived. I want to ask you something. How many years has it been since the Vorkal faced a real challenge? Something that forced you to change or die. Zelvar's plates went through a color sequence the software could not fully interpret. 43,000 cycles. There was a plague that threatened several worlds. We developed treatments through careful research. But that was the last true crisis we faced. 43,000 years of safety, of stability, of peace. Reeves nodded slowly. That sounds wonderful. But it also sounds boring. Humans are only a few hundred years into space exploration. Everything is still new to us. Every challenge is fresh. We're still learning who we are and what we can do. And that is precisely what makes you dangerous, Zelvar said quietly. A species, still discovering its capabilities, is unpredictable. You do not yet know your limits, because you keep exceeding them. After Zelvar left, Reeves sat alone in the conference room, thinking about the conversation. She pulled up the star charts that the Vorkal had shared, showing the extent of the hegemony's territory. Hundreds of star systems, thousands of worlds, billions of beings all living in careful harmony under logical administration. And humanity was about to crash into that careful stability like a meteor into a calm sea. She thought about Earth, about the messy, beautiful chaos of human civilization, about the wars, and art, and music, and arguments, and discoveries, and failures, and triumphs that defined her species, about the fact that humans had spread across dozens of star systems in just a few decades and had no intention of stopping. The Vorkal were right to be concerned. Not because humans were evil or malicious, but because humans did not fit into the careful patterns that the galaxy had established. They were too fast, too aggressive, too unpredictable. They were the variable that no one had planned for. And variables, Reeves knew from her tactical training, were what turned theoretical victories into actual defeats. No plan survived contact with an element that refused to follow the expected patterns. She wondered how the Hegemony Council would respond when they learned about humanity. Would they try to contain human expansion? Would they attempt to force humanity into compliance with galactic norms? Or would they recognize that humans could not be contained, only accommodated? More importantly, she wondered how Earth would respond when they learned about the hegemony. Would humanity try to integrate peacefully into galactic civilization? Or would they do what they always did when encountering a larger, more established power structure. Would they compete, challenge, and push until they either found their place or forced everyone else to make room for them? Reeves suspected she already knew the answer. Humans did not ask for permission. They took risks, made mistakes, learned from failure, and tried again. It was messy and inefficient, and produced a lot of conflict. It was also how humanity had survived when dozens of other species on Earth had gone extinct. It was how they had spread across an entire planet, despite lacking natural weapons or armor. It was how they had developed technology that rivaled or exceeded that of species with hundreds of thousands of years head start. Senior observer Gelvar had asked her how many wars humanity had survived. The truth was simpler and more terrifying than he realized. Humanity had never stopped fighting one. Not against external enemies, and not against the universe itself. Every human alive was a soldier in the war for survival, whether they realized it or not. It was built into their genes, their culture, their psychology. And now that war was about to expand to a galactic scale. Reeves stood, straightening her uniform. She had a report to write, a command to brief, and a ship to get home. But beneath those immediate concerns, she felt something else. Not fear, though perhaps she should have been afraid. Not uncertainty, though the future was completely unknown. What she felt was anticipation. The galaxy thought it knew how civilizations developed, how species interacted, how progress happened. Humanity was about to prove them wrong, not through conquest or conflict, necessarily, but simply by being human, by refusing to accept limits, by challenging assumptions, by surviving when logic said they should fail, by fighting when wisdom said they should surrender, by being the variable that no equation could predict. She smiled. This was going to be interesting. 3 months after the Relentless limped back to UNSC space, senior observer Gelvar stood before the Vorkal Hegemony Council and prepared to commit what might be considered treason. The council chamber was ancient, carved from crystal that had witnessed 200,000 cycles of deliberation. Around him, the 12 council members sat in their elevated positions, their body plates displaying colors that ranged from calm blue to agitated yellow. They had spent the past hour reviewing his reports about humanity, and their conclusion was exactly what Gelvar had feared. The humans must be contained, announced Council Leader Myrtal, her plates a decisive green. We cannot allow such an aggressive species to expand, unchecked through the galaxy. They are too dangerous, too unpredictable. We will establish a quarantine around their territory. No human vessels will be permitted beyond specified boundaries. And if they refuse to accept these boundaries? Gelvar kept his voice steady, despite the certainty that he was about to destroy his career. Then they will be forcibly restrained. We have the military capability to enforce compliance. With respect, Council Leader, I do not believe we do. Gelvar gestured to the holographic display showing human territory. In the 3 months since first contact, humans have expanded their presence to 4 additional star systems. They have constructed 2 new military shipyards and increased their fleet size by 11%. They are not slowing down. They are accelerating, which is precisely why they must be stopped now, before they become too strong to contain. Another council member, Vexthar, leaned forward. Your own reports indicate that humans are biologically incapable of accepting restrictions. This makes them a fundamental threat to galactic stability. Yes, they are a threat. But council members, may I speak plainly? Gelvar waited for permission. Received reluctant acknowledgement. Attempting to quarantine humanity will guarantee the war we are trying to prevent. And based on everything I have learned about these beings, it will be a war we cannot win. The chamber erupted in multicolor flashing of disturbed plates. The concept that the mighty Vorkal hegemony could not defeat a species barely 200 years into space travel was apparently too absurd to accept. Explain, Myrtal commanded. Her plates, demanding orange. Humans do not calculate victory the way we do. We assess force ratios, resource availability, strategic positioning, We fight wars to achieve specific objectives, and when those objectives become impossible, we negotiate. Humans fight wars until one side cannot physically continue. They will accept catastrophic casualties that we would consider civilization ending. They will sacrifice entire fleets if it means achieving their goals. And most critically, they will never surrender. Every species surrenders eventually, Vexthar argued. When the cost becomes too high, logic dictates capitulation. Not for humans. I have studied their history extensively. They have a cultural concept of fighting to the last soldier, the last bullet, the last breath. It is not metaphor. It is literal. Humans would rather die extinct than accept defeat. Gelvar pulled up battle records from human history. This is Thermopylae. 300 soldiers held a mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They all died. They knew they would die. They fought anyway, because their deaths served a larger purpose. That is illogical, yes, but it is effective. The delay allowed their civilization to prepare and eventually win the war. Gelvar changed the display. This is Stalingrad. The humans fought building by building, room by room for months. Millions died. The city was destroyed. But they did not surrender. And eventually they prevailed. Ancient history. Mrital dismissed. Surely modern humans are more logical. Are they? The UNSC colony on Harvest was attacked by raiders 5 years ago. The colonists, civilians with minimal military training, fought with improvised weapons for 6 months, until relief arrived. 80% casualties. They could have surrendered at any point. They chose to fight. That is who humans are. The council members conferred among themselves in rapid color patterns. Gelvar waited, knowing that he had not yet made his most dangerous argument. Even if what you say is accurate, Mrital finally said, it simply reinforces the need for containment. Better to restrict them now than fight them later. Respectfully, council leader, I disagree. I believe we should offer humans an alliance. The color explosion that followed his statement was immediate and overwhelming. Plates flashed through combinations that indicated shock, outrage, and disbelief. Gelvar had expected this reaction. What he had not expected was the small section of green approval he saw from 3 council members, including, surprisingly, Mrital herself. Explain this proposal, the council leader commanded, her plates settling to neutral blue. Gelvar had prepared this argument over many sleepless cycles. The hegemony faces a threat that we have not discussed publicly, but which this council is certainly aware of. The Catharan swarm. I'm now. The chamber went silent. The Catharan were not a topic discussed in open forum. For 3,000 cycles, we have fought a defensive campaign against the swarm, a hive-mind species that consumes worlds and converts all biological matter into more of itself. We have held them at the frontier, but we have not pushed them back. Every year, we lose more territory. Every cycle, the defensive line contracts slightly. We are losing this war so slowly that it is not apparent to the general population. But this council knows the truth. Mrital's plates had gone pale. How did you learn of this? I have security clearance for first contact situations that requires understanding major galactic threats. The Catharan data was in my briefing materials. Gelvar pressed forward before he could be stopped. Our defensive strategy is failing. Because it is purely defensive. The Vorkal do not think in terms of aggressive warfare. We fortify. We hold. We protect. But the Clarans simply adjust their approach and find new vectors of attack. We need a different strategy. We need offensive capability. And you believe humans can provide this? Vexthar's skepticism was evident. I believe humans are biologically and culturally designed for exactly this type of conflict. They are pursuit predators who do not stop until their prey is exhausted. They are survivors who thrive in hostile environments. They are warriors who refuse to accept defeat. These are precisely the qualities we need against the swarm. Or we will simply be arming another threat, Myrtal countered. But her plates showed she was considering, rather than dismissing. Perhaps. But Council Leader, we have a choice. We can try to contain humanity and almost certainly trigger the war we fear. Or we can engage them as allies, share our technology and knowledge, and direct their aggressive instincts toward a common enemy. Which option preserves more Vorkal lives? Before the Council could respond, an alarm chimed through the chamber. A priority communication from the frontier. Myrtal accessed it immediately, and Jelvar watched her plates go through a color sequence he had never seen before. Pure white, the Vorkal color of absolute terror. The Catharan have broken through Sector 9. 3 colony worlds are under attack. Fleet estimates indicate we will lose all 3 within 10 cycles. The Council erupted in activity. Orders were issued, fleets mobilized, evacuation procedures initiated. In the chaos, Jelvar pulled up a private communication channel. He had maintained contact with Captain Reeves over the past months, ostensibly to establish proper diplomatic protocols. In reality, he had been preparing for this moment. Captain Reeves, this is Senior Observer Jelvar. Emergency priority. The human appeared on his display, her face showing concern. Behind her, the bridge of a new ship. Not the Relentless, which was still in repair. Something larger. Jelvar, what's wrong? The hegemony is under attack by a hostile force. 3 worlds in immediate danger. I have not been authorized to request assistance, but I am doing so anyway. Captain, I need to know. If I provide you with coordinates, can humans reach those worlds in time to help? Reeves turned to someone off-screen. Jelvar heard rapid conversation in human language. Then she was back, her expression grim and determined. We can have 3 battle groups there in 12 hours. But Jelvar, we need to know what we're fighting. I am transmitting all data on the Catharan swarm now. Captain, I must warn you. The hegemony has been fighting this enemy for 3,000 cycles. We have never defeated them, only delayed them. The Catharan are perhaps the most dangerous force in the known galaxy. Something changed in Captain Reeves's expression. Her eyes hardened. Her jaw set. Jelvar recognized the look from his studies of human psychology. It was the expression they displayed when told something was impossible. When challenged. When presented with obstacles that logic said could not be overcome. Transmit the coordinates, Reeves said. We'll be there. The Council has not authorized this. If you come, you will be entering what is technically hegemony space without permission. It could be considered an act of war. Then you'll have to ask your council for that authorization in the next 12 hours. Reeves smiled. And it was not a gentle expression. Because the UNSC doesn't leave people to die when we can help. Even people who wanted to quarantine us. The connection ended. Jelvar turned to find Council Leader Myrtal standing beside him, her plates displaying complex patterns he could not fully interpret. You contacted the humans without authorization. Yes, Council Leader. I accept whatever punishment the Council deems appropriate. What did they say? They are coming. 3 battle groups, within 12 hours. Myrtal was silent for a long moment. Around them, the council chamber had descended into organized chaos as the hegemony prepared its response to the Catharan breakthrough. Finally, she spoke quietly. I have spent 2,000 cycles in service to the hegemony. I have seen many crises, many challenges. But I have never seen anything like what is happening at the frontier. We are losing, Jelvar. Slowly, carefully, logically, losing a war against an enemy that cannot be reasoned with. I know, Council Leader. And you believe humans can change this? I believe humans offer something we do not have. The willingness to risk everything. The ability to adapt rapidly. The refusal to accept defeat. Jelvar met her eyes with all of his own. The Vorkal are wise, ancient, powerful. But we have forgotten what it means to fight for survival. Humans have not. They fight that war every day. If we accept human assistance, if we form this alliance you propose, the hegemony will change. We will no longer be able to control our own destiny, as we have for 200,000 cycles. We have not controlled our own destiny for the past 3,000 cycles. The Ctharan have been slowly taking it from us. The only question is whether we accept slow extinction or adapt to survive. Non. Raytal's plates shifted to a color Gelvar had only seen in historical records. Deep gold. The color of major decisions that would reshape civilizations. I am authorizing human fleet entry into hegemony space for the purpose of mutual defense against the Ctharan swarm. I am also proposing to the full council that we enter into formal alliance negotiations with humanity. Zelvar, you will serve as primary liaison. If this succeeds, you will be honored. If it fails, we will both be remembered as the ones who brought about the hegemony's destruction. I understand, Council Leader. 12 hours later, Gelvar stood on the observation deck of a Vorkal command ship at the edge of Sector 9. Below, 3 colony worlds burned as the Ctharan consumed everything in their path. The hegemony fleet had established defensive positions, but they were fighting a delaying action. Everyone knew the worlds were lost. Then the sensors detected spatial anomalies. Human FTL drives did not create the elegant portal transitions that Vorkal vessels used. They ripped holes in space through brute force, emerging with energy discharges that lit up every detector within light minutes. 3 human battle groups dropped out of FTL between the Ctharan fleet and the colony worlds. Gelvar counted 18 warships, smaller than Vorkal cruisers but bristling with weapons. And at the center, one massive vessel that dwarfed everything else. That's the UNSC Pride of Earth. The Vorkal tactical officer reported. Carrier class. Sensor readings indicate she is carrying over 200 strike craft. The human fleet did not pause to assess the situation. They did not request battle plans or coordinate with Vorkal forces. They simply attacked. The strike craft launched in swarms, moving with coordination that suggested either highly advanced AI or pilots with reflexes far faster than any Vorkal possessed. The capital ships opened fire with every weapon they had, filling space with kinetic rounds, missiles, and energy beams. The Ctharan responded as they always did. The hive mind vessels were biological constructs, massive living ships that could heal damage and adapt to threats. They had survived 3,000 cycles of Vorkal weapons because they learned and evolved. They would analyze the human weapons, develop countermeasures, and within hours be nearly immune to the same tactics. Except the humans did not use the same tactics for hours. They changed their approach every few minutes. Railguns switched to missiles. Missiles switched to energy weapons. Energy weapons switched to kinetic impacts. The human pilots flew in patterns that seemed random but achieved devastating coordination. Where Vorkal forces operated on careful planning and measured response, humans operated on chaos and adaptation. The Ctharan could not adapt fast enough. Senior Observer, the human fleet is broadcasting on all frequencies. The communications officer sounded stunned. They are requesting that Vorkal forces pull back to defensive positions around the colonies, while human forces engage the primary swarm fleet. They want us to stand aside? No, Senior Observer. They want us to protect the civilians while they destroy the enemy. They are saying, exact translation, we've got this. Keep the people safe. Gelvar watched as human forces carved into the Ctharan fleet with ferocity that defied his understanding. A Vorkal vessel engaged the swarm by maintaining distance and using superior range and accuracy. The humans dove into close range, accepted damage to their shields, and simply overwhelmed their targets with concentrated fire. It was brutal. It was inefficient by Vorkal standards. It was also devastatingly effective. Captain Reeves is hailing us. The communications officer reported. The human captain appeared on the display, her face illuminated by red emergency lighting. Her ship had clearly taken damage, but she was grinning. Gelvar. We're about to try something aggressive. Recommend your ships clear the battle space by at least 50,000 kilometers. What are you planning? Well, our analysis shows the Catharan ships are biological. They heal from damage. They adapt to threats. But they need time to do both. Reeves looked off screen. We're not going to give them time. Every human ship is going to hit the largest swarm vessel with everything we have, all at once. Overwhelming force before it can adapt. That will leave you vulnerable to the other Catharan vessels. Yeah. Probably going to take heavy damage. But if we can take out their command ship, the rest should fall into disarray. At least, that's the theory. And if the theory is wrong, Reeves's grin got wider. Then we'll figure something else out. That's what humans do. The channel closed. Gelvar watched as all 18 human warships aligned on a single target. The massive Catharan bioship at the center of the swarm fleet. For 10 seconds, every weapon on every ship fired simultaneously. The kinetic and energy release was visible from orbit, a focused beam of destruction that tore into the bioship from multiple angles at once. The Catharan vessel attempted to adapt, attempted to heal, attempted to defend itself. But the sheer volume of incoming fire exceeded its ability to respond. Within 30 seconds, the bioship was gone, consumed in a fireball that looked like a small star birthing and dying in compressed time. And just as Reeves had predicted, the other Catharan vessels faltered. Without central coordination from the hive mind, they reverted to basic behavior patterns. The Vorkal fleet, which had been holding defensive positions, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that was confused and vulnerable. The battle lasted another 3 hours, but the outcome was decided in those first 30 seconds. By the time the last Catharan vessel was destroyed or driven off, all 3 colony worlds had been saved. Damaged, but saved. Millions of Vorkal lives preserved that would have been lost. And the hegemony had learned something profound. For 3,000 cycles, they had fought the Catharan to a stalemate. In 3 hours, humans had driven them into retreat. Not through superior technology, not through better weapons, but through sheer willingness to take risks that no logical species would accept. Through tactics that prioritized victory over preservation. Through the fundamental human conviction that any challenge could be overcome through sufficient application of force and determination. Gelvar received clearance to board the Pride of Earth after the battle. He found Captain Reeves in the medical bay, having burns on her arm treated while she reviewed battle reports on a portable display. Your ship took significant damage, Gelvar observed. 12 casualties, 2 ships heavily damaged. But we won. Reeves looked up at him. Your people are safe. That's what matters. The Council wishes to speak with you. To discuss formal alliance. About time. Reeves winced as the medical technician applied something to her burns. Gelvar. I need to be honest with you. When you first scanned the Relentless, when you saw what humans are capable of, you were right to be concerned. We are aggressive. We are dangerous. We don't follow the rules the rest of the galaxy has established. Yes, but we also don't let people die when we can help them. We don't accept defeat when we can fight. And we don't stop looking for solutions just because the problem seems impossible. She met his multiple eyes with her 2 forward-facing ones. The Vorkal have spent 200,000 years building a civilization based on logic and order. That's impressive. But sometimes, logic and order aren't enough. Sometimes you need someone crazy enough to try things that shouldn't work. Gelvar's plates shifted through several colors before settling on amused green. Senior Observer is my title. Not my name. My actual name, in your language, would be translated as Gelvar the Cautious. It was given to me by my broodmates. Because I always calculated every risk before acting. Not anymore, Reeves observed. No. Not anymore. Because I have learned that some risks must be taken. Some challenges must be faced, even when logic suggests caution. You call this courage. The Vorkal do not have a direct translation. But I believe I am beginning to understand the concept. Minas. 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 Welcome to humanity, Reeves said, grinning. Where the impossible is just a suggestion. 3 months later, the formal alliance between humanity and the Vorkal hegemony was ratified. The galaxy would change in ways that no one could predict. Ancient civilizations would adapt or fall behind. New conflicts would arise. The careful balance of power that had existed for cycles beyond counting would shift. But for Gelvar, standing in the council chamber and watching the first human ambassadors arrive, only one thought occupied his mind. When they had scanned the relentless and first encountered humanity, they had found something that shook them to the core. Not because humans were perfect, or invincible, or even particularly advanced, but because humans showed the galaxy what it had forgotten. That survival required risk. That progress demanded change. That sometimes the only way forward was to stop calculating odds and simply fight for what mattered. The Vorkal had spent 200,000 cycles learning how to survive through caution. Humans had spent 10,000 years learning how to survive through defiance. Together, they would discover what the galaxy could become when wisdom met courage, when logic met determination. When those who planned met those who acted. Zelvar's final report to the council ended with a single line. We scanned their warship, expecting to find weaknesses. Instead, we found the mirror of what we must become to survive. The humans are terrifying not because they are monsters, but because they show us that survival demands we become what we fear most. Willing to fight. Willing to sacrifice. Willing to never, ever surrender. Perhaps this is what it truly means to be alive, and in his private files, a notation that only he would see. A reminder for the cycles to come. Humanity. Fuck yeah. He had learned the phrase from Captain Reeves. She told him it was how humans expressed pride in their species, acknowledgement of their flaws and strengths combined. It was crude by Vorkal standards, but somehow perfectly appropriate, because that was humanity in 3 words. Defiant. Proud. Impossible to stop. And now, for better or worse, they were the galaxy's problem. Not to contain or control, but to learn from, to work with, to be challenged by. The galaxy would never be the same. And looking at the first human ambassadors, at their confident strides, and their expressions that suggested they saw the entire galaxy as just one more challenge to overcome, Gelvar found himself grateful for that change. Even if it terrified him to the core,